For as long as man has recorded his history, he has been at the mercy of the inscrutable whims of the old gods. That was simply the order of things, until Almer, the Ascended One, overthrew the kings and sultans of his time and dispelled man's reliance on the gods of old, marking a turning point in human history and the birth of a new calendar. For a time, mankind knew peace and prosperity, but as the centuries marched on, Almir's influence waned. Mankind once again found itself plunged into the depths of a new dark age. In the year 809, a small party known as the Fellowship would embark on a heroic journey to the city of the gods. There they would entreat the gods of old on behalf of all of mankind for the right of self-governance. As Almer had before them, they would rise to godhood and lead humanity out of the Dark Ages. But just as Almer before them, the new god's reign would not last. By the 16th century, most of Europa laid war-torn and devastated by famine. The kingdom of Rondon would unite many warring tribes under one banner through force. The elites and nobles ruled over the populace with an iron fist. The oppressed people called out for a champion, placing their hope in the ancient prophecies. For they foretold a fair-haired man who rivaled the gods in beauty and power would overthrow their corrupt rulers and unite the warring states. By the year 1590, a great plague had befallen the kingdom of Rondon. More than ever did the people hope for salvation. A mercenary band known as the Knights of the Midnight Sun, and their leader Lagarde, rose to prominence and was hailed by many as the fulfillment of the prophecies. Fearing that Lagarde may lead a rebellion, the king and the nobles crushed the Knights of the Midnight Sun with the full force of the Rondon military. Lagarde was captured and subsequently sentenced to imprisonment in the most ancient prison in all the land, colloquially known as the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger. For this reason, 4 strangers, each with their own motivations and independent from one another, would attempt a harrowing mission to infiltrate the infamous dungeon to find the man of prophecy. Ragnvaldr, the Outlander, was born with the soul of the tormented, destined to struggle and suffer every step of the way through life. But what does not kill you only makes you stronger, or so they say. From a young age, Ragnvaldr's father trained him in the art of war. He quickly mastered the bow and melee combat. He would grow to be a proud and strong warrior of his clan. These dungeons were all too willing to put these skills to the test, however. These beasts were larger and more intimidating than any wolf that Ragnvaldr had ever seen in all of the north. Truly, these terrible hounds guarded the gates of hell itself. All too quickly, the Outlander could feel the cold darkness crawling over him, like a swarm of biting vermin. He could instinctively tell that the ever-present, all-consuming, inky blackness that filled this place was the same as that of the dark continent of Vinland. This place is surely tainted by the same ancient deities. it is safe to assume that the gnawing hunger and creeping madness will infect all who dwell here sooner or later. This misshapen brute appears to be a guard, or rather it used to be, no doubt tainted by the evil influence of this forsaken place. Regnwaldr's body and mind may have been tempered by the frigid, unforgiving northern lands and the doomed voyage to Vinland, but one false step in this place would swallow him whole. But none of that mattered. For Ragnvaldr, there is only the mission. Ragnvaldr's blood runs cold as the bird-face abomination locks eyes with him. This one feels different to the others. It's best not to linger. Without a word, Ragnvaldr grants the twisted amalgam the mercy of a swift death. It would be preferable to the slow agony of starvation. That is a fate he would only wish upon his most hated enemy. When it came to flying goblins, Ragnvaldr shoots first and asks questions later. Ragnvaldr couldn't kill this ironclad behemoth of a knight, but he could outrun it. A ritual circle drawn in blood, no doubt dedicated to a dark god of old. Similar circles were commonplace throughout all of Vinland. An unnatural, bloated creature gently hovers through the air. Its presence is disturbing. Ragnvaldr could not help but feel drawn to whatever lies behind the door, but it was far too sturdy to break down. Now was not the time to get distracted. The ugly beam catches Ragnvaldr by surprise and bombards his mind with visions of runes shrouded by an unearthly green glow. An otherworldly voice fills his mind. I must absorb your life force. It's nothing personal. The sheer number of dead men here is staggering. This fortress is less of a prison and more of a mass grave. Ragnvaldr could not help but notice that the bizarre reptile that walked like a man resembled the massive monuments that stretched into the dark caverns below the jail cells. Maybe in the ancient past they ruled this land. There is undoubtedly more lurking further down. Enki, the dark priest, was born with the soul of the enlightened, burdening him with relentless hunger for knowledge and secrets, a trait that he shared with his twin sister. Both had been selected at birth to join the Order of the Dark Priesthood for this very reason. After a few years of instruction and study in the Dark Priesthood, the day had finally come for the initiation rite. Enki and his sister were each given a ritual dagger and instructed to fight to the last breath. Having been born with a weak constitution, Enki was immediately overpowered by her. With her blade pressed to his throat, he closed his eyes and awaited death. She, however, stood up and began to walk away instead. Mercy was not considered a virtue among the ranks of the Dark Priesthood. Enki's masters signaled him to stab her in the back. It would have been all too easy to seize the opportunity. Enki had gone on to become a well-renowned Dark Priest throughout the Western world, recognized by many of the top scholars and naturalists of the kingdom for his many achievements in science and blood magic. This newfound status was enough to gain access to the royal library of the Kingdom of Rondon. All the knowledge of the modern day laid at his fingertips now, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough, and yet it seemed that there was nothing left to learn. That was until word of the fabled man of prophecy reached his ears. Fueled by envy and curiosity, he knew what must be done. He must meet Lagarde, no matter the cost. Enki scoffed at the foolish mockery that lay dead before him. This creature clearly represents an abuse of the Sylvian rite of the marriage of the flesh. The ritual is meant to be performed so that two may become one, not 20. They should not have dabbled with what they did not understand. This well, stinking of decay, pulled far-off memories to the forefront of Enki's mind. The Dark Priests had no place for the weak. After having accepted defeat at the hands of his sister, his master cast Enki into the bottom of a dry well to slowly wither and then rot. Instead, he ate the insects and small creatures that surrounded him in the dark. After a time, Enki acquired a kinship with the other forsaken and forgotten inhabitants of the well, learning to understand and gaining mastery over the insects. With the aid of his new slaves, in the dead of night he was able to escape the well and re-enter the temple. Passing on the chance to burn the temple to the ground, he instead ransacked it and disappeared into the night with many precious tomes. The best revenge would be to surpass his former masters as a dark priest. It was certainly more satisfying than the thought of simply killing them. That childhood ordeal had sparked an interest in the god of the depths. The old god had favored him in the well after all. Perhaps it would favor him again. Enki could feel the ancient deity's presence stronger here than anywhere else in his entire life. Those many years spent studying the enigmatic god may yet pay off. Enki had not expected his fellows of the Dark Cloth to be hostile, or to go so far as to perform a summoning chant to kill him. Perhaps they have gone mad, or maybe they belong to an opposing sect. Whatever the reason, it really is a shame. He had hoped to learn more about the goings-on here. The man and Enki exchanged knowing glances. Completing the ritual he had interrupted was the least he could do for this man. He dies with a smile on his face. Although he did not know the reason that the man wished to be a blood sacrifice in Almir's name, he empathized with the conviction. Between the effigies and the ritual sacrifices, Almir had a surprisingly strong presence in these dungeons. The devotees of Sylvian don bunny masks and hold orgies in the old god's name, a luxury Enki does not have time to indulge in right now. While not pleased with the horrid state of disrepair of this fortress, Enki was grateful to avoid the hulking, bloated brute. Enki could not help but feel annoyed that this place was seemingly completely overrun with subhuman freaks. And judging by this one's loincloth, it was happy to see him. The feeling was not mutual. The same cursed stones could be found in Vinland. Ragnvaldr understood their use well. Wolves underground seems almost normal compared to these massive eggs strewn about. The origin of the flying goblins had made itself known, and was somehow even more grotesque than Ragnvaldr had imagined. The beast did not know when to give up. It would not escape again, however. As the creature's soul was drawn into the stone, Ragnvaldr could feel a surge of strength. He would put it to good use. The monstrous hound was wary, but not hostile. Ragnvaldr could see a glimmer of intelligence in its 4 eyes. She was not like the other beasts. Moonless would be a fitting name for a wolf that has never seen it. Bizarre artifact? Ragnvaldr speculated that it could be the one stolen from his clan. It would be worth investigating the cave dweller's city, if he could find it anyway. It was easy to see how Rudemir's expedition force could have gotten lost down here. These tunnels seemed to go on forever, and with no visible ore veins in sight, hardly seems worth the effort of excavation. A sea dragon? Here, underground? Ragnvaldr would need to distract it. An egg from the cave may be enough. Moonless exhibits a cunning intelligence by blinding a larger, more powerful foe. This sea dragon just further demonstrates that everything about this dungeon is backwards and upside down. Monsters pulled from fairy tales are under every other stone. Reason has abandoned this place. Even though he had just slain a dragon, Ravenwalder was not confident he could kill a spectral dead man, assuming it's real, that is. Waiting to see the outcome of this man's blood magic would prove fatal. If the dance must be performed to complete the spell, then the solution is obvious. To the victor, the spoils is the only thing you can rely on in this dark hellhole. These magic baubles will prove invaluable, surely. Anki never expected to see a lizard man firsthand, but even more surprising is the hall itself. The bodies are rotting, but the blood is fresh. The entire passageway is part of an ongoing ritual. The presence resting here is incredibly powerful. It would be unbelievably foolish to disturb it. A putrid odor is emanating from the recently slain bird woman. This obelisk is beyond ancient. It is at least several millennia old. Anki practically salivated at the mere thought of the type of secrets buried beneath this fortress. This ritual circle is among the most intricate Anki had ever seen. It was perfectly balanced between Almer, Grogaroth, and Sylvian. The dark priest who had inscribed it must be exceptionally talented, although it was possible that the mysterious alchemist from before had inscribed it. He may have valuable information about this dungeon, and many other interesting topics as well. It would be worth seeking him out. Powerful necromancy binds this knight as an internal guardian for this door. Entry would be impossible until it is laid to rest. The most efficient solution is not always the best one. However, this time it is. Enki found Nostradamus to be a rather eccentric fellow, but he was extremely generous with information and his lab materials. Had Nostradamus not implied that Lagarde may be executed soon, he could have spent days in conversation with him. The remains of a yellow mage. This confirms Enki's suspicion. Nasra rests in the bloody passageway. He was sure of it. Quick thinking saved the head of the Dark Priest. Enki instinctively knew he would not survive a confrontation with this crow-faced abomination. Every fiber of his being was screaming run while he still had a chance. Regenwalder was eager to rid the world of this wizard, and with good reason. The summoned swarms were distracting and disorienting, but the insects could only keep Moonless's teeth from his throat for so long. The strange inhabitants of the subterranean village, upon seeing the stone crown Regenwalder had claimed from the sea dragon, treat him with caution and a reserved sort of reverence. Regenwalder did not know the reason, but was glad they did not immediately attack him as nearly everything and everyone else had so far, although that may change if they do indeed have the clan's stolen relic, and he tries to reclaim it. Regenwalder knew this massive being all too well. This was a physical manifestation of the nameless god of the depths, the very same god that held sway over all of the cursed continent of Vinland. He could not help but feel that Vinland had followed him all the way back to the civilized world, but there was no use dwelling on it. He must find the artifact. Here it is, the cube recovered from Vinland. The warrior simply lowers his head and allows Regenwalder to take the cube. Given all the heads on pikes and the worship of the god of darkness, he had expected to have to fight his way out of the village. But once again, the dungeon runs counter to all common sense. Thinking back on all the soul-crushing misfortune this cursed cube had brought down upon him, Regenwalder could not quantify his need to retrieve it, perhaps just to spite that man. But whatever the reason, there is yet one more thing to be done. This thing is all blades and leather, warped beyond recognition. Very little traces of its humanity remain. The lizard man lunged from the shadows, startling Enki and causing his blood magic to veer off course. The lizard is a cocky bastard, thinking just because he poisoned his prey, he had already won. Enki had the cure for an overinflated ego. As a fairly accomplished alchemist himself, he also had the cure for the lizard poison. The crow was still hot on his heels. Enki knew he had no time to waste. Restless spirits abound. While common steel could not reach them, the blood arts could. The crow was back. There was no avoiding it. Do or die time. The thing radiates fear, the same kind of fear that the dark god in the mines exuded. It must be its chosen servant. Ragnvaldr was not above fighting dirty, especially not in the face of this enemy. The crow was fast and strong. Even blinded by acid, it was formidable. One false move and this thing could peck his head off, or bludgeon him to pulp with its great maul. It would be best to keep a distance and wear it down. This monster even wielded the other carrion birds as an extension of its own body. Truly, this was the will of the darkness itself made flesh. No, it couldn't be. Surely it was dead. The voice that called out to Ragnvaldr in the basement was back. With the crow's key and soul in hand, he could find it. He could find the voice beyond the door. He wanted to find it. No, he needed to find it. Against his better judgment, Ragnvaldr grasps the grotesque blade. Feeling the need to justify to himself taking the miasma, he reasons that it could be a valuable tool against the monsters still lurking in this evil place. This massive warrior clad in thick armor appears nigh invulnerable, but he is slow, and his armor is no match for the miasma's edge or need for blood. As Ragnvaldr's collection of souls continues to grow, so does his ability to push past his human limitations. With each mighty warrior or hideous monster felled, he becomes more of a monster himself. Any merchant willing to capitalize on the suffering of others most likely has untrustworthy wares as far as Ragnvaldr was concerned. Maybe the world would be a better place without him. Darcy was born with the soul of domination, making her a talented leader, innately capable of bending others to her will. She was born into a wealthy noble family, and was trained to become a holy knight of the kingdom of Rondon from an early age. Proving herself to be gifted in combat, she quickly rose the ranks and became a valuable asset to the kingdom. However, before long, Darcy became disillusioned with the kingdom, which justified its ruthless expansion as the will of the gods. In the wake of its endless campaigns laid countless crushed citadels, slaughtered men, enslaved women, and orphaned children, all to fatten the nobles who sat comfortably behind their castle walls. Her family would not allow her to bring shame upon them by retiring from the military. Left with no other option, Darcy broke all ties with her family and disappeared. Soon after, she met Legard. There was something otherworldly about him. He was charismatic. All of the common folk flocked to him. He shared their humble origins, and was widely considered the people's champion. Darcy and Legard were of like mind in regard to the excesses of the kingdom. His warm words seduced her heart, and due to her past accomplishments, he offered her a high-ranking position in his army. Darcy was all too happy to accept. The size and influence of the Knights of the Midnight Sun grew at an unbelievable pace. Once the kingdom made their move against Legard, Darcy spearheaded the counter-assault. Although ultimately Legard was captured and his army defeated, Darcy was among the few survivors that was able to escape capture. But she couldn't let it end there. If she could just free Legard, they could start over. If the prophecy was true, they could rebuild and effect real change. Corpses littered every corner of this place. The smell was so putrid Darcy could hardly hold back from vomiting. As a knight of Rondon, Darcy and Sir Seymour would have been enemies on the battlefield. Keeping her identity secret will allow her to get into his good graces and possibly find clues to Legard's whereabouts. Darcy had taken the rumors about this place with a grain of salt, but now seeing the strange beast with the man's face and the giant deformed dead man, maybe nothing is off the table anymore. Kahara was born with the soul of the endless, making him always yearn for freedom, and compelling him to push the limits of his creativity. You can't con a con man. Kahara could see this man was a charlatan from a mile away. Kahara was born in the capital city of the eastern sanctuaries, Jataya, and abandoned there as a young child. His creativity was put to the test in the harsh Jataya streets, where he got by as a pickpocket and eventually working his way up to burglary. Once he was older, his talents caught the attention of a notorious veteran highwayman who offered to take him under his wing. Kahara joined up with him and his band of criminals and ex-soldiers. They became something of a new family and taught Kahara every dirty trick in the book. During one of their many raids, his brigade got ambushed. When push came to shove, Kahara abandoned his new family, as his old one had abandoned him. Always on the move, Kahara eventually ended up in the kingdom of Rondon, where the silver was loose as long as he got his knife dirty. One day, a few high-ranked officials of the kingdom made him an offer he could not refuse. They needed an outside sword to infiltrate their own stronghold and rescued the fabled mercenary Captain Lagarde. Kahara knew something was not right with the mission, but the price most certainly was. In preparation for his departure from Rondon, he spent the entire night at a brothel, drinking and getting laid. Kahara suddenly felt dizzy, as if the floor had given way like quicksand. He could feel something take hold of his ankle. Is this a dream? Where is this place? And what was that? Kahara had so many questions. Now he knew he was dreaming. The only thing he could do is push on until he woke up. Was that a hallucination? Kahara assured himself that he'd just been hitting the bottle too hard lately, willfully ignorant of the fact that he still had the tobacco and ale he found in the dream. Kahara, upon noticing the huge man with an arrow lodged in the back of his skull, couldn't help thinking to himself that this is the biggest, ugliest son of a bitch he had ever seen. Despite how tired and hungover he was, Kahara still wasn't willing to rest here. Kahara stood corrected. The last guy was only the ugliest, not the biggest. Enki implicitly understood what this large pulsating mass was, but finding Lagarde would have to take precedent for now. The claws of this distorted man were concerning enough, but Enki found the horrible plant growing from his skull to be particularly troubling. There was no choice but to resort to powerful blood magic. Even with both legs injured, the massive brute was barely phased. Enki needed to end this quickly. Any strike from this beastly lummox could prove fatal. Strangely, the cell was unlocked. There was no need to lock it. A dead man can't run away. Enki was immeasurably disappointed, but all was not lost. This place was special. The secrets buried here were tantalizing enough to stay regardless of the great peril. But first he would need to rest a while. Casting the black orb twice in quick succession had left him drained. Enki was lucky there were so many high-quality ritual circles to take advantage of. With just a few drops of blood and a prayer to Almer, he could disappear and reappear at another nearby ritual circle. A handy escape route if another brutish oaf tried to corner him. He was grateful to whomever inscribed them. It would have taken weeks to set up so many himself. The city of the gods, Mahabra. Maybe it really was here. Why else would the presence of the old gods be so strong here? This poor malformed man is deluded, but seems harmless enough. But even so, Ragnvaldr can barely resist the urge to kill him. A cursory glance was enough for Ragnvaldr to tell that most of the people wearing rabbit masks have lost their will to do anything other than fornicate like animals. Whether it was the madness of these dungeons or something else, they will all die of thirst and exhaustion soon. Best not to get involved, lest their madness spread to him. Still, resting under the sun here for a while will be a much-needed reprieve. Unfortunately for Darcy, her captain was nowhere to be found in any of these cells. She would have to keep searching. Kahara had a lucky break. Not a living guard in sight, or prisoner for that matter. Everything in the dungeon so far had been dead. As concerning as that was, at least he could rest for a little while. Darcy was shocked at the sheer number of bodies she's seen in the basement and now in this hall. It was absurd, as if a battle had taken place here. Darcy was relieved to hear a man, and not some acid-spitting terror. The hysterical rantings of this man make it sound as if they were in the belly of some great beast. Perhaps now the man will calm down, and she can get some coherent answers from him. Even though he was not helpful to her, Darcy was glad to have saved him. A warning shot? Darcy was relieved he did not go for the kill. The fact that he was from Oldegard concerned Darcy. He may hold a grudge against the Knights of the Midnight Sun. That confirms it. He is looking for Legard as well. The large, gnarled blade he was brandishing was making her feel somewhat nauseous. Darcy was relieved he did not want to travel together. He may have tried to kill Legard. Hopefully Almer is watching over Legard. The emaciated man with the malformed face seemed to want to stay to himself, which suited Darcy just fine. The sight of the bunny-masked revelers revolted Darcy so much she almost didn't notice the massive dog sleeping near the fortress wall. She was rather eager to leave the courtyard and all of its unusual inhabitants behind. Darcy was happy that so far all of the monsters here have been dead, although she feared running into whatever had slain them all. Kahara was no stranger to death, but this place was practically made of human remains. All hell had broken loose. Clearly the kingdom has lost all control of this place. This shed some light on his employer's intentions. They must fear that their precious prisoner will escape or die before they can make full use of him as a propaganda piece. Kahara almost didn't believe his eyes. A living, breathing man, a rare sight to behold here. The man's iron mask, deep raspy voice, and labored breathing made it difficult to gauge the truthfulness of his words. Better to err on the side of caution and assume his maps are fake. This place was a maze. The architect was clearly mad, and so were the builders who constructed it. The structure itself was so compromised that many areas were completely inaccessible without explosives. The poor girl is as thin as a rail, and couldn't be more than 10 years old. Kahara shuddered to think why she was here in this cage. Had he not cleared the rubble, no one would ever have found her. Lagarde is not listed among the inmates. Kahara rather not take her with him through this hellscape, but he can't just leave her alone. Even he has some lines he won't cross. The girl burst into tears as she ate. Kahara felt saving torches would be prudent. He was confident enough to navigate back to the northern exit without one. Despite having been killed, the crow did not die. Even with its soul ripped from its body, the Avatar of Darkness continued its pursuit of the living. Kahara didn't know why the Birdman didn't try to pursue them further. He and the girl were both too scared to dwell on it. Never before had he experienced such terror. From now on, the torches stay lit. Regenwalder grew restless. He could not waste any more time resting here. More hellhounds. Just more blood to be spilled. The twisted tree seemed to feed on the corpses. That would hardly be the strangest thing Regenwalder had seen here. Nothing in this dingy library interested Kahara, but the girl found a tattered old book she seemed to like. Even though Kahara doubted she could read modern text, let alone whatever that was written in, there was no harm in letting her have it. Maybe she enjoys the pictures. The ugly, starved man seems to be minding his own business. They would do the same. He looked too frail to pose a threat anyway. Kahara knew the girl would not help much in combat situations even with the dagger, but if it eased her mind and made her less fearful, then she would slow him down less at least. If nothing else, it was nice to see her smile. They were not about to crawl into a tree that had taken root in dead bodies. Only a lunatic would consider that. They would need to backtrack to the prisons to make their way further below. If not for the girl, Kahara likely would have joined in. This dungeon was littered with traps, perhaps holdovers from before this place was a prison. Kahara instructed the girl in how to avoid the hidden pressure plates that triggered the arrow traps. The girl nods and hangs on his every word. She has yet to speak a single word, but clearly understands him. Maybe she can't, maybe she won't. Either way, he wished that she would. Kahara marveled at how well the girl handled all the rotting bodies. The poor thing clearly was just used to it. What else had she seen while trapped in these walls? Somehow, this dead freak reeked worse than the hall that was filled ankle-deep in blood. Surely these had to be the largest, ugliest bats in all the world. Kahara got an eerie feeling from the tall man in the cat mask, but at the same time he was sort of drawn to him. After pausing for a moment, and much to his own surprise, he chose light. Yet another merchant in a strange mask. Kahara's blood ran cold. The eerie feeling he initially had was replaced by overwhelming fear, not unlike the terror he experienced when the Birdman had ambushed them, but different somehow. The god of the depths' influence felt stronger here, almost as strong as at the cave dweller's altar that the cube was resting on. These malformed things look like they used to be women. They have been twisted and robbed of their will by the dark god. The darkness swallows all who lack the will to resist it. Ragnvalder knew if he wavered for even a second, he would share the same fate. But these thoughts quickly became buried underneath the overwhelming bloodlust. They all must die. Darcy had been wandering the mines for some time. Perhaps she was going in circles. The men wearing wolf masks were locked in a cannibalistic frenzy. They did not even notice her. She didn't plan to stick around until they did. Was that a spirit? Or had she just become delirious with fatigue and hunger? Could that be a dragon? So many questions raced through Darcy's head. She didn't even believe in such mythological beasts before coming to this dark place. But now they seem commonplace. How was such a beast even slain? Perhaps it was felled by a troop of knights? There were several bodies surrounding it after all. This dead man was garbed in the robes of the eastern sanctuaries. This place even attracts foreigners. Darcy had never seen men like these before. Did they actually live down here? She was wary due to all the severed heads on pikes, but she was lost and weak from hunger. She had to take a chance. The savagery on display shocked Darcy. She had to run before she was next. Now that she had wounded the cave woman, she hoped to slip past and escape out the other end of the village. But it was no use. She would have to cut her down. The exit up ahead is blocked by two more of them. She has no choice but to go back the way she came. They are relentless. They won't stop until they die. What even was that? Another freakish monster? Whatever it is, it's far more dreadful than the cave dwellers. With her torch burning out, it was difficult for Darcy to see. The cave dweller, on the other hand, had long since adapted to the darkness. The girl seemed shaken from her encounter with the man in the cat mask. Kahara could not blame her. He was, too. Kahara chose to completely ignore what could only be described as a gigantic dragon, as if refusing to acknowledge it made it less real. This person was too androgynous to tell if it was a man or a woman. At least they seemed sane and friendly. Kahara felt that he could trust the alchemist's words. Kahara knew there must be more prison cells lower down, and that it was most likely where Lagarde could be found, but it was nice to have some confirmation. Getting there and finding him was another matter altogether, unfortunately. Kahara had a soft spot for women. It was only natural that he step in. Now that he knew they share a common goal, there was the possibility she could make a good ally. This oaf was so abnormally strong he could wield a ballista like a crossbow. Had they not got the drop on it, at least one of them would be dead for sure. Darcy was worried they would be set upon by the cannibals she came across earlier while they searched for an exit. But she was more worried that they would run out of food and share the same fate. Regenwalder continued to tear his way through the unnatural thicket, disemboweling every unfortunate soul that crossed his path with feverish glee. It wasn't enough. The more blood he spilled, the more he needed. If things continued as is, it would only be a matter of time before Moonless became another victim of his bloodlust. A small refuge had been carved out of the all-encompassing darkness and supernatural overgrowth. At the center, lodged in the cold cobblestone, stood a lone, Eastern-style blade, forged in some strange, dark steel. A spirit wielding a ghostly Eastern blade appeared before Regenwalder, seeking to reclaim his sacred steel. Regenwalder, who had cautiously avoided specters up until now, charged ahead with reckless abandon, miasma in hand. The apparition felt tangible against miasma's pulsing otherworldly edge, just as the phantom's Eastern blade was tangible against Regenwalder's flesh. Miasma's voice was pushed deep down. It was not gone, but it was bearable. It now had to compete with the will of the black steel of the East. The phantom stood alone against the darkness for so long. Now the task had been entrusted to Regenwalder. The walls were covered in throbbing vines, making traversing narrow spaces difficult. Just as the darkness had twisted these people into faceless, mumbling slaves, so did it taint the plants as well, which then went on to infect the mumblers, burrowing into their flesh in an incestuous spiral of suffering. Regenwalder would gladly grant them the mercy of death. Upon seeing the massive beating heart, without a second of hesitation, Regenwalder sliced it open, spilling foul-smelling ichor out of the gaping wound. He now understood the nature of this rotting fortress. This entire time he had been trotting about in the guts of the god of the depths. The god had swallowed him whole the moment he stepped into the darkness just beyond the dungeon gates. This revelation would not sway him, though. He would complete his mission, and then cut his way out of the belly of the beast. Throngs of biting insects cover every inch of the floor, far too many to kill. Another repulsive heart beats its last, but the beast lived on. Regenwalder didn't know if it could die, but he was all too eager to see if it would. Yet another blind, lurching freak lies dead here. Someone had been here first. As powerful and monstrous as these guards had become, they paled before the type of monster that Regenwalder now was. He had reclaimed his clan's relic, and Lagarde was dead, even if it was not by his own hands. He should feel happiness or relief, but Regenwalder felt nothing. These victories were hollow. For so long, the hunt for this man had given his life meaning. He had given no thought to what would come after the hunt was over. Regenwalder found the priest to be somewhat insufferable, but he had suffered far worse already. He also found the truth he spoke of fascinating. Maybe he could play a role in the greater scheme of things. There was no one waiting for him to return, so why not delve deeper down into the darkness here? The threat of starved cannibals continued to loom over Darcy's and the others' heads, but more foreboding were the specters of the long-dead miners that popped up at every turn. The ghost's awareness had been dulled over the ages, wandering the mines, allowing the living to carefully avoid contact. Kahara noticed a faint blue light in the distance. He was not sure what it was, but it could lead to a way out. A blue sword that radiated heat and light. The temptation of this otherworldly blade was too much to pass on. Without the sword, the unstable mines begin to crumble. The girl opens her tattered book, and time seems to slow to a crawl. The three quickly lose consciousness, only to wake on their feet. Before them stretched a vast city, bathed in the golden light of a cold sun. The party was frozen in their tracks, ever so briefly, by the gaze of the new gods. Without a doubt, this is the fabled lost city of the gods, Mahabra. The sprawling towers and uncanny architecture inspire both wonder and malaise. Kahara wasted no time and quickly began looting whatever he could find. Strange sights abound. Disturbing men with legs of spiders crawled the streets, and depictions of grotesque old gods could be found carved in many walls. All too soon, their vision became hazy. The world seemed to be rapidly slipping away. The three found themselves back in the mines. Had it all been a dream? A shared dream, even? As their confusion gradually lifted, they found the mines had caved in all around them, but they remained unharmed, as if they were just placed there after the fact. The city of the gods must not have been a mutual dream, but rather a joint reality. They retained both the otherworldly sword that was inscribed with strange runic markings, as well as the supplies taken from the city. However, the girl's book had crumbled into dust. The only possible understanding was that Mahabharata was real, and they had been there. But these musings would have to wait. They desperately needed to escape from the collapsed mines. Soon the cavern had given way to a strange underground forest, filled with writhing flowers and grotesque dead monsters. At last they had made it back into the dungeon. The fact that they felt relieved to be back in this morbid place spoke to a change taking place within themselves. Darcy's tensions were eased a little because the path had been cleared for them. Surely she would be reunited with Lagarde soon. Lagarde's life had been swallowed up by the dungeons, and with him, all of Darcy's hope. Kahara was disappointed to say the least. His big payday died with this man. Nosramis's words washed over Darcy without her noticing, but they inspired Kahara. If he could find Mahabharata again, he could find riches many times more valuable than Lagarde's bounty. He couldn't have come this far and gambled with his life to leave empty-handed now. They were all tired and on edge, but Darcy had clearly seen the worst of it. If Kahar was going to find the ancient city of the gods, he would need everyone in top condition. Enki's lie was a shot in the dark. It did not seem to pay off. The massive behemoth slowly emerging from the shadows prompted Regnvalder and Moonless to lunge into action. They landed many powerful blows on the arrogant head, but to no avail. Nasra was unfazed, and the damage inflicted gradually repaired itself. The looming demon faded into nothingness as Enki bowed before the disembodied head. Regnvalder promptly, but begrudgingly, followed suit. The notion of killing the new gods resonated with Regnvalder in a way that surprised even him. Perhaps this new quest was the meaning he was searching for. For Enki, it was just a means to an end. If some gods must fall to find the truth, so be it. The gateway to the city of the gods was precisely where Nasra stated it would be waiting for them. They held the key. All that was left was to step through.